Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be sharing how to deploy a Dawn application with Docker, which include Nginx and Certbot. Before we start, I will expect you to have your cloud instance and DNS ready. You can see that I have my instance ready and my DNS is pointing to my instance IP address now. Once we have everything ready, let's get started. The first step I would have to do is to modify my SSH config. I will be using VS Code throughout this entire video because we have a lot of configuration to write. So from here you can see that I have my SSH config open. So the first thing I would need to do is to add a host here. Then I can give it whatever name I want. That doesn't matter. What's really matter is the host name. So this host name we have to put the IP address of our instance. So from my case, I will just copy it from my DigitalOcean here, copy it, and then put it here. Then user is root, and identity file would be the DigitalOcean private key, then identity only, yes. So that's all for our SSH config. So the next step we need to do is to download the extension name remote SSH. For my screen, you can see that I actually have this installed, but if you haven't yet, please install it because we're using this extension to access to our instance. So once you install this extension, you can see the bottom right, we have one icon here. Click on it. Then we choose connect current Windows to host. Then you can see that there's a new host that we created just now. So click on this thing. Then you might get prompt for this fingerprint, just click continue. You might also get prompt for the operating system that you're going to use. So you will just clicking on Linux or Windows or Mac OS based on your self-preference. So right now we can see that the bottom right showing that we actually have connected to the instance. So let's continue to the next step. Once we connected to our instance, the first step we need to do is to open our terminal. Then we have to update all our dependency. Then the next step is to install all our Docker Compose. I will be open this Docker Compose documentations from their official website. I will be choosing Debian for my OS. So I just copy all the commands here. I will fast forward this video because it's going to take some time. Once we have Docker installed, we have to verify the version. Okay, so we have Docker installed. So the next step is to install the Docker Compose. So let's check our Docker Compose version. So we have Docker Compose installed as well. So let's proceed to the next step. So the next step we have to do is to create a directory. And we changed our directory to the directory we just created just now. And we also can open the directory that we create. Then from here, we can create a new directory called Nginx. And we need to create a Docker file. And inside the Docker file, we need to pull the Nginx image. And we also have to create a Docker Compose. Inside this Docker Compose, we need to give it the version, everything. But before that, I'm going to install the extensions. So from here, I will get some autocomplete. Version is 3.9. then service call it Nginx, build, context, which is Nginx, this is our directory, then docker file, this docker file. Then we need to map our ports to 8080 and restart unless stop. So that's all for our docker compose file. Let's try to run it. So from here, we will be pulling the image. Once the image has been pulled, then we can check whether this Nginx is working correctly. So we can see that the Nginx is working correctly right now. So the next step we need to do is to transfer our .NET application files to our instance. To do it, we need to go back to our VS Code again. Then we need to install the rsync package. This is to transfer our files from our local to remote. Then I will be using WSL and transfer my file to the instance. So I have this autocomplete ready. I just hit enter. Before that, I need to clear out my SSH. So you can see that we have all the files passing into our instance right now. Then the next thing we need to do is to create a Docker within this directory. So the first thing we need to do is to define our SDK image. Working directory, apps, then copy our CS project, docker.net CS project, then run .NET restore to restore all the dependency, and then copy the rest of the file to this working directory and run .NET publish to release directory and output to app publish. So this is our SDK. Then the next thing we need to do is to define our runtime. Same, I will just copy all this again and I change it to ASP.NET 6.0. Then the environment, this is very critical. We need to add this ASP.NET core URL in order for our website to work. Then working directory still the same, apps, and we need to copy from our base image, then from the publish directory to our working directory. Then we need to set our entry point, which is .NET docker.NET DLL. So that's it. Then the next step we have to do is to create another file in our Nginx, name it Nginx Config. Then we need to add events, HTTP, also the upstream. We will call it web API now. We will be fetching this from the Webpack Compose later. Then server listen to port 80, then server name, create demo, and location. So this location I'm not going to write it because it's quite lengthy. I'm just going to the ASP.NET Microsoft official website and copy this statement. Go to reverse proxy, and then we just copy the location here and put it inside, and that's it. So that's all we need to set up. Another things that we need to change is that we have to replace this HTTP to our upstream, which is the web API in this case. And this API, I mentioned it wrongly just now, this API we will be fetching it from the Docker Compose. So right now we have to go back to our Docker Compose to define our service name API. Then from here we have to write the build context from .NET Docker file, and we need to expose our port 5000. Then need to restart unless stop, and we will be adding a dependency as well and also networks. So from here, once we set up this thing, then we need to go back to Nginx service and replace the build with volumes. We will be mapping our directory to the Nginx directory. So from here, we will just adding Nginx config tc Nginx. And we need to mention the image as well. So we will be fetching Nginx stable pine. Then it depends on the API. So once we define this thing, we need to remove the Docker file from the Nginx directory. We are no longer using it. Then the next step we need to do is that we need to create the networks. Then we call it Nginx network with the driver bridge. Then we will put the network into the Nginx service. And also the API service. So once we have this ready, we can run the Docker Compose out. Yep, so we have all the service running. So let's go back to our browser again and double check if it's working fine. Weather forecast. So you can see that our .NET application is working fine right now, but without SSL implement. The next step we have to do is to apply the SSL to our Nginx. But before we moving on, I actually have my gist open because in the later sections we are going to write a lot of configurations. So I will put this link in the description below so that you can copy and paste and follow along. Let's go back to our VS Code right now. The first thing we need to do is to add the certbot service in our Docker Compose. And followed by the volumes. Then we need to add the restart. And we need to copy this and place it to the Nginx service. Then the next step we need to do is to create a template inside our Nginx directory. And then we need to create a file called nginx.config.template. So inside here, we are going to copy these configurations inside the gist, which is this one. We just copy from line 10 to line 50 and put it here. So this is actually the configuration that we need. And you can see that there are something quite similar from the Nginx config, but in this case we are not using this anymore, so we can remove this file. And we also have to update the mapping here. We need to map this to templates and Nginx templates. We also need to add the variable here called environment. Let's name engine host and give it a name. The value is our domain. Okay, from the config here that we actually mentioned that we are using these SSL certifications from this directory, and also include this thing as well. This include and DH param. So the next thing we need to do is to pull this Nginx config and also the DH param. So we go back to our gist again. We just copy this line, create a new directory called setbot, then followed by config live, then our domain, hit enter. Then we can pull the certificate. So from here you can see that we have this file ready. Then the next thing, we need to define a variable. Let's encrypt live, then followed by our domain again. This is because we are going to reuse this path again and again, so it's very troublesome for us to keep typing it. So we just store this thing into a variable, then we just go back to the gist again to copy this self-signed certificate and put it here. The reason why we need to create a self-signed certificate is because that our Nginx need to use the certificate to run the service before we can actually request the SSL from Let's Encrypt. So let's hit enter. So we actually have the SSL created, so we can see it from here. So the next thing we need to do is that we need to start the Nginx service. We just docker compose up force recreate Nginx. So once we start the service, we can check whether this Nginx is running correctly or not by running docker logs, then app scroll Nginx 1. So we can see that everything is running fine, no errors. Okay, great. Then we need to move on. We have to declare another variable again and put our domain. Then we can go back here and copy this line to remove our SSLs that we generate just now, because they're just a dummy. So once we remove this SSL, the next step is that we need to use setbot to request for SSL. So we just copy this thing again, then place it here. What's really matter is that we need to indicate whether this cert is used for staging or not, and also followed by your email address and also your domain. So once we have this thing in place, then we just hit enter. Then we would wait for the service to run and request for the SSL. You can see that we actually have our SSL generated. So the next thing we need to do is to start our service again. Docker compose, execute, Nginx. This is to reload our Nginx service. Then we just run docker compose up and remove, then build. Before we try out the API is working correctly, we actually need to add the port 443 here in order to make it works. So we will just terminate our service again and rerun docker compose up to make sure everything is fine. Then let's go back to our browser again and try to refresh this. Yep, so it's working fine right now. So that's all for the video. Thank you for watching.